Millionaire, CEO, hired a fake wife for a family wedding and was left speechless when he saw her. He was a powerful CEO with a secret plan. She was a struggling artist fighting to save her family's legacy. They were supposed to fake a love story to fool everyone. But what happens when the lines between acting and reality start to blur? When cold contracts turn into lingering glances, and one bold confession threatens to shatter everything. In a world where betrayal lurks behind every smile, can a love born from lies survive the truth? Stay with us, because this story of unexpected connection, heartbreak, and breathtaking redemption will leave you believing in miracles all over again. Before we begin the story, leave a comment below. Tell us where you're watching from, and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our latest stories. Enjoy the story. He stood alone in a penthouse that kissed the clouds above Manhattan. Yet Ethan Caldwell had never felt more cornered. The skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of his modern Upper West Side apartment, a breathtaking view that had once reminded him of how far he'd come. But tonight, it only reminded him of everything that was closing in. Ethan Caldwell, 39, founder and CEO of Caldwell Technologies, was a man used to having full control over his business, his brand, and his emotions. But even the most calculated men can't control family, especially not when family comes dressed in a floor-length silk gown and a lifetime of expectations. Your brother's wedding will be a circus, Ethan. His assistant, Angela, had warned earlier that week, her voice calm, but with the edge of someone who knew him too well. And your mother is already telling people you're bringing someone. Ethan's jaw had tightened, and by someone, she means a future daughter-in-law. Angela said, not missing a beat. She's expecting you to make an announcement this weekend. It was absurd. He had barely recovered from his last PR nightmare, his very public breakup with a fellow executive at the firm. And now he was expected to parade into his younger brother's vineyard wedding in Napa with a glowing fiancée on his arm. All to stop his mother from throwing him at every heiress and socialite in attendance. She can't make announcements about things that don't exist, Ethan said flatly. Angela raised an eyebrow. Then maybe it's time to make something exist. That's how the plan was born. A contract. A temporary arrangement. A woman who would show up, act enamored, endure 2 days of awkward family dinners and champagne toasts, and leave with a paycheck big enough to solve whatever problem had brought her to agree to it in the first place. And that woman was late. Ethan glanced at the sleek clock on the wall again, his pulse tightening. The intercom buzzed. She's here. Angela's voice rang through. Do you want me to send her up? Do I have a choice? He muttered, adjusting the cuffs of his shirt. The elevator chimed. A soft ding, and then footsteps. She was nothing like he expected. She wasn't stiff, rehearsed, or fake. She wasn't wearing some designer dress that screamed, "Look at me." Instead, she walked in with natural grace. Her chestnut hair, loosely pinned back, a navy dress that fit her like it was chosen for comfort, not impression. Her green eyes locked with his, not shy, not too bold, but clear. She extended her hand. Hi, I'm Lena Hart. Thanks for trusting a complete stranger with your weekend. He hesitated before taking it. Her handshake was warm and real. Too real for this charade. Ethan Caldwell, he replied, thanks for showing up. They sat on opposite ends of a leather sectional, while Angela went over the contract. The terms were clear. 2.5 days of appearances. One shared backstory about meeting at an art exhibit in Soho. A few rehearsed lines about falling in love over bad wine. No physical affection beyond what was necessary for the act. And if anyone asks, Lena said, "You're an illustrator. You live in Brooklyn. You're passionate about books and art." Ethan replied, handing her a printed bio with everything she needed to know. Lena's eyebrow arched. "This is very detailed, down to my favorite flower. You like peonies?" he said a little too quickly. "Angela's thorough." Lena studied him for a beat, then smiled genuinely. "You know, if we really met at an art show, maybe we should say, 'I accidentally spilled wine on your overpriced blazer, and you gave me a lecture about dry cleaning.'" Ethan blinked. "That wasn't in the script." "Exactly," she grinned. "If you want people to believe a story, don't make it perfect. Make it messy. Make it feel like life." And that was the first moment he saw it. That glint of creativity, of warmth, of something unscripted. Something that had no place in his world of scheduled meetings and sterile perfection. The next morning, they boarded the flight to Napa. Lena traveled light. One worn leather suitcase, a sketch pad, and a book about storytelling. Through art. Ethan had never sat beside someone on a plane who fell asleep within 10 minutes and looked completely at peace. He found himself watching her, wondering what her real story was. The vineyard estate in Napa Valley, where his brother's wedding was being held, looked like a postcard. The air was perfumed with lavender, and the sound of string instruments playing under a pergola where the rehearsal dinner would be held. Ethan's family was already there, his younger brother Nathaniel charming as ever, Nathaniel's bride-to-be, and of course Vivian Caldwell, his mother, regal, sharp-eyed, and already judging Lena from across the terrace. "Smile," Ethan whispered to Lena as they walked hand in hand toward the welcome party. "I am smiling," she replied under her breath. "On the inside. Try the outside." She glanced up at him with a playful glint, then looped her arm through his. And for a moment, Ethan forgot they were pretending. Ethan Nathaniel greeted with a bear hug. "And this must be Lena. Wow. You're even prettier," than he led on. Lena laughed, not flustered in the least. "He says very little, but I guess that makes compliments rare and therefore meaningful." Even Vivian, who was notorious for sniffing out insincerity, seemed caught off guard by Lena's poise. "And what do you do, Lena?" she asked coolly. "I illustrate children's books," Lena said, "and I run a bookstore in Brooklyn. Very small, very drafty, very dear to my heart." Ethan braced for the judgment. Vivian sipped her champagne, her lips tightening. "And what are your intentions with my son?" Lena didn't miss a beat. "Oh, just to make him laugh once in a while. That alone is a full-time job." A few guests nearby laughed. Even Ethan allowed himself a rare, quiet chuckle. But as they walked away, Ethan leaned closer. "You didn't have to go toe-to-toe with her. She started it," Lena said, then added softly, "and you've been protecting yourself from her for too long." Ethan stared at her for a second, wondering how she could see so much. She wasn't supposed to be like this. This wasn't supposed to feel like anything. And yet, for the first time in years, Ethan felt something shift. Something open. Something real. Because sometimes, the most perfectly planned lives are interrupted by the most unexpected people. And that's where the real story begins. Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned for the rest of this unforgettable journey between Ethan and Lena in part 2. The following morning, the vineyard basked in a soft golden glow as the sun rose behind the rolling hills of Napa. The scent of dew-soaked lavender floated through the air, mixing with the faint aroma of coffee and pastries being set up for breakfast on the terrace. Ethan Caldwell stood near the railing, sipping his black coffee and watching the distant workers tend to the grapevines. From the outside, everything appeared perfect, postcard perfect, but inside, something unfamiliar stirred. Behind him, the sliding door opened and closed with a soft click. "Morning," came Lena's voice, warm and sleepy. She padded over barefoot, wearing a loose cream sweater over jeans and holding a steaming cup of tea. "You're up early." Ethan nodded, glancing at her. "Couldn't sleep." She leaned her arms on the railing beside him, their shoulders nearly touching. Too much pressure, being someone's fake fiancé. He allowed himself a half smile, something like that. For a moment they stood in comfortable silence watching a hawk circle above the distant trees. Lena tilted her head slightly. "You ever wonder what it would be like if none of this existed? No company, no reputation, just still mornings and clean slates." Ethan glanced at her, surprised. "You'd give up your bookstore," I said. "Clean slate," she grinned. "Not clean out my soul." He chuckled despite himself. And for the first time since the weekend began, he realized how easily her presence softened the edges of his thoughts. Later that day, the schedule was relentless. A garden brunch with the extended family, a photo session at the vineyard's main gate, and a wine tasting hosted by the bride's parents. Through it all, Lena played her part with an effortless charm that even Ethan's mother found hard to fault. Ethan watched her closely, how she engaged people with genuine interest, how she smiled without trying to impress, how she moved through the crowd like she belonged there. She didn't cling to him, didn't fake adoration, but every time their eyes met across the table, or in passing, something flickered between them, a secret, a slow-forming truth they hadn't yet dared to name. After the wine tasting, Ethan retreated to the edge of the estate, where a stone path wound around a rose garden and led to a small gazebo overlooking the valley. He needed airspace. He wasn't sure why his chest felt tight. This wasn't supposed to feel personal, but it did now. Lena found him there, sitting on the stone bench, his elbows resting on his knees. She walked up quietly and sat beside him. "You disappeared. Crowds aren't really my thing. Neither is pretending to be madly in love with someone you barely know," she replied gently. "Yet you're doing a pretty convincing job." He turned to her, searching her face. "So are you." She looked away for a moment, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. "It's not hard to pretend when some of it doesn't feel so fake anymore." The admission lingered in the air, raw and unguarded. Ethan felt something shift inside him. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said quietly, "and I'm not sure what I expected when I signed that contract, but it wasn't this." She laughed softly. "You expected a robot. More like someone who'd follow the script and disappear after brunch." "Well," Lena replied, tilting her head, "I don't usually follow scripts or disappear. Not unless I'm told to." He met her eyes. "Don't." The word came out low earnest. She blinked slightly, caught off guard. "Don't what?" "Disappear." She looked at him for a long moment, as if measuring the weight of what he just said, then nodded, barely perceptible. That evening, as the sun dipped below the hills and the rehearsal dinner began, Ethan felt more aware of her than ever before. When she laughed with his cousins, when she took his hand at the table, when she rested her head briefly on his shoulder during a long toast, it all felt seamless, undeniably real. But that illusion was tested by a familiar presence. Victoria Greer, elegant, manipulative, and dressed in a sharp black cocktail dress that didn't belong at a family dinner, but demanded attention all the same. She sauntered toward their table with calculated grace, her lips curled into a predatory smile. "Ethan," she said, her voice syrupy. And "Lena, is it? I've heard so much." Ethan stiffened, but Lena smiled. "All good things, I'm sure." "Of course." Victoria's eyes sparkled with false sweetness. "Though I must admit, this engagement took us all by surprise. You know how people talk." Lena sipped her wine calmly. "People always talk. The smart ones listen less." Ethan's hand found hers under the table, a silent thank you. After Victoria left, Lena leaned closer, whispering, "She's trying to bait us." "I know," Ethan said, jaw tight. "She won't succeed." He looked at her, studying the courage in her eyes. "How are you this calm?" She shrugged. "I've spent my life proving people wrong. This is just another version." He wanted to say more, that he admired her, that he wasn't sure where the line between pretend and reality was anymore, that he didn't want this weekend to end the way they planned. But for now, he only said, "Thank you." She smiled. "You're welcome." And as the evening wore on, the script faded more and more into the background, because somewhere between the shared glances, the quiet confessions, and the growing spark, they hadn't planned on something real was beginning, and neither of them wanted to stop it. The morning of the wedding arrived with a sky painted in the softest blues and pinks. The vineyard glistened with early dew, the air heavy with the scent of roses and ripening grapes. Guests moved quietly through the estate preparing for the ceremony. There was excitement in the air, but beneath it, for Ethan Caldwell, a storm was brewing. He stood by the bedroom window of the guest cottage he had been assigned, staring at the rows of vines stretching toward the horizon. His tuxedo hung behind him, untouched. A tightness had built in his chest overnight, because today wasn't just his brother's wedding. Today was the day everything might unravel. Lena had been different that morning. Still warm, still her, but quieter. There was something in her eyes as she brushed past him after breakfast, as if she were already preparing for the end. Maybe she was. After all, this was the final act. The curtain would soon fall. What happened after that was still a blank page. Ethan wasn't ready to let go. Down in the bridal suite, Lena Hayes stood in front of a large mirror, adjusting the pale lavender dress she had been given to wear as a guest. Her reflection didn't feel quite real. The woman staring back at her looked calm, collected, graceful. But inside, she was twisting with unease. It wasn't just Victoria's threat that haunted her, though that alone was enough. It was the fear that maybe, just maybe, her heart had taken things too far. She hadn't meant to fall for Ethan Caldwell. But how could she not? Behind the precision and control, there was depth, vulnerability, kindness. A man who saw her. A man who, despite every reason not to, had started letting her into his world. But she wasn't part of his world. Not really. And she had no idea if the man she had grown close to would choose truth or damage control. The ceremony was stunning. The bride glowed, the groom beamed, and the vows were enough to bring tears to the eyes of even the most cynical guests. Lena stood beside Ethan, their hands linked for the show, their expressions soft for the cameras, but neither was pretending anymore. They were simply holding on. The reception began just before sunset in a sprawling garden, lit by string lights and dotted with tables draped in white and gold. Laughter floated through the air. Wine glasses clinked. Toasts were made. Ethan had just stepped away to greet a business associate when Lena felt someone approach. She turned and found herself face to face with Victoria Greer. Victoria's smile was sugar-coated with spite. "Well, well, you clean up better than I expected." Lena remained still. "Was there something you needed?" Victoria's voice dropped sharp and venomous. "I don't need anything. But you might. I'd hate for that charming bookstore of yours to lose its newfound financial angel." Lena's heart thudded. "What are you talking about?" "Oh, please," Victoria sneered, producing her phone. On the screen was a forwarded email thread, one between Sarah, Ethan's assistant, and the mutual friend who had connected Lena to the job. It outlined payment terms and a very clear summary: pretend engagement, 3-day gig compensation. "I wonder what the Sterling family would think of this," Victoria whispered. "Or Ethan's investors, or the press. Wouldn't it be delicious to see it all go up in smoke?" Lena felt the blood drain from her face. "I suggest," Victoria said, stepping closer, "you disappear before the cake's cut. Quietly. With what dignity you have left." Lena said nothing. She simply turned and walked away. The air around her, feeling like glass that could shatter at any moment. She found Ethan near the dance floor. He saw her coming and immediately sensed something was wrong. "What happened?" "Victoria knows everything," she said softly. "The contract, the payment. She has proof." Ethan's face hardened. "Did she threaten you?" "She didn't have to. I know what happens next. Ethan, she'll go to your mother. You're bored. She'll twist it to make it seem like you were scammed and I..." "Lena." His voice was firm grounding. "Look at me." "She did. I'm not going to let her do this. Not to you. Not to us." Her throat tightened. "There is no us. Remember, that was the deal. Deals can change." Before she could respond, a hush fell over the crowd. Eleanor Caldwell, matriarch of the family, and the sharpest presence in any room, stood on the small stage with a microphone in hand. "If I may," she began before we toast the bride and groom, "I'd like to thank everyone for being here. Family is complicated, but it is also sacred. And in that spirit, I've asked my son Ethan to say a few words." "Ethan." Every head turned. Ethan stiffened, then looked at Lena. "Will, you stand with me." Lena hesitated, but when he offered his hand, she took it. They stepped onto the stage together. The lights were warm. The air was still. Ethan faced the crowd, then turned to his mother, to his brother, and finally back to Lena. "I want to say something that may surprise you," he began. "Some of you have asked about our engagement, about how quickly it happened. The truth is, it didn't." Whispers. "At least not in the way people expect, Lena. And I met under unusual circumstances. She agreed to be by my side this weekend to help me navigate a complicated family event. It wasn't supposed to mean anything." He looked down at Lena, but it did. Silence. It meant everything. He turned back to the guests. "I'm not proud of how it started, but I am proud of the woman standing next to me. Her heart, her courage, her honesty. And if anyone here thinks less of her because of how we met, then they don't know her at all." A stunned hush filled the garden. Even Victoria seemed frozen. "And now," Ethan added, raising his glass to love, "however it finds us, however unexpectedly it begins, may we always have the courage to follow it." He stepped down, taking Lena's hand with him. Her fingers trembled. "You didn't have to do that," she whispered. "I know," he said gently, squeezing her hand. "I wanted to." And in that moment, surrounded by applause, flickering lights, and 1,000 unspoken emotions, Lena realized something profound. He wasn't just playing the part anymore. Neither of them were. Under the quiet hush of early morning, the vineyard stood still. The party had ended hours ago, but the emotions of the night still lingered in the air. The confession, the silence that followed the look in Ethan's eyes as he told a garden full of people that what started as a contract had become something real. All of it played in loops in Lena's mind. She hadn't slept. She sat by the window of her guest cottage, her dress from the night before, hung neatly over a chair, her overnight bag still packed. She didn't know if she was staying or leaving. What she did know was that something had changed in her and in him. She had never asked for this, never sought it out, but something about the way Ethan stood beside her last night, the way he chose truth over pride, made her believe that maybe they weren't pretending anymore. But what happened next? What happened when they returned to their real lives? His full of boardrooms and billion-dollar deals. Hers filled with dusty books and barely paid invoices. Across the vineyard estate, Ethan stared at the ceiling of his childhood bedroom. The light filtering through the shutters danced over the walls, but he barely noticed. The adrenaline of the night before had worn off, replaced with the quiet thrum of reality settling in. His mother hadn't spoken to him since the speech Victoria had disappeared after her public defeat. And Lena, she hadn't knocked on his door or sent a message. He didn't blame her. He hadn't even had the chance to ask her to stay. He stood, pulled on a plain t-shirt, and headed toward the one place he hoped she might be, the overlook behind the vineyard's chapel. When he reached it, there she was, sitting on a wooden bench, barefoot, the early sun catching in her hair. She turned at the sound of his footsteps, but didn't smile. "Not yet." "I didn't think you'd come here," she said softly. "I had to see you." There was a long pause. Then Lena asked, "So, what now, Ethan?" He sat beside her, not too close. "I don't know. I just know. I'm not ready to walk away. Are you?" "I don't want to walk away either. But your life, it's not built for someone like me. I don't want the life I had before if it doesn't have you in it." She looked at him, then really looked. The carefully guarded executive was gone. In his place sat a man, unsure, vulnerable, open. "I didn't mean for this to happen," she whispered. "Neither did I. But I'm glad it did." They sat in silence for a moment, the vineyard stretching endlessly before them. When they returned to Chicago, the pace of the city hit them like a wave. Ethan dove back into meetings, strategy sessions, PR cleanups. From the unexpected revelation, the media had caught wind of his confession, and gossip blogs spun it into something between scandal and modern-day fairy tale. His mother still refused to comment, retreating to her estate in Napa. Lena returned to her life in Wicker Park. She used the payment from the arrangement to secure the bookstore for another year, paid off 2 months of utilities in advance, and threw herself into illustrating a new children's series. She avoided the headlines, the comments, the curious glances from neighbors who recognized her from an online article. But she didn't avoid Ethan. He called often, sometimes just to say good night, sometimes to ask about her day, once to apologize again for dragging her into all of it. She never needed the apologies. What she needed, what surprised her, was how much she missed hearing his voice. 2 weeks after the wedding, Ethan showed up at the Story Nook, unannounced. Lena was rearranging the front display when the doorbell chimed. She looked up and froze. He wasn't in a suit. He wore jeans, a navy sweater, and the nervous expression of a man about to say something that might change everything. "I brought coffee," he said, lifting 2 cups from her favorite cafe down the block. She raised a brow. "Do you even drink anything that isn't imported or hand-ground in Vienna?" "I'm trying new things." They sat in the children's corner, surrounded by tiny chairs and stacks of picture books. Lena took a sip, then looked at him. "You're here. I missed you." She bit her lip. "Ethan, I don't know what this is or what we're doing." "I do," he said quietly, but with certainty. "I know it's not perfect. I know I don't belong in this world. And I know I've made more mistakes than I can count. But when I think about who I want to talk to at the end of the day, it's you. When I think about a life that makes sense, it's not the penthouse or the profit margins. It's this place. It's you." Lena's eyes shimmered. "That's a lot." "I don't expect answers right now," he said quickly. "I just need you to know I'm not giving up. I'll show up as many times as it takes." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Just don't bring bad coffee next time," he grinned. "Deal." Over the next few months, their connection deepened, not with grand gestures, but in the quiet moments that slowly built trust. Ethan started spending more time at the bookstore on weekends. He offered business advice only when she asked, and even helped install a new online ordering system through his company's community outreach fund. Lena continued to illustrate using his late-night texts and occasional clumsy attempts at poetry as unexpected sources of inspiration. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of doubt, conflicts between his schedule and her independence, questions about what the future would look like. But there was something steady beneath it all. A sense of mutual choice, a willingness to keep trying. One evening, as autumn wrapped the city in gold, Ethan helped Lena close the store. The last customer had left, the lights were dim, and the wind whistled outside. He turned to her, brushing a lock of hair from her face. "I've had everything money can buy. But this, you, it's the first thing that feels real." Lena smiled. "So what now?" He didn't hesitate. "We write the next chapter together." Winter settled gently over Chicago, blanketing the city in quiet snow, lined the rooftops, and shimmered against the windows of Sterling Innovations headquarters, where Ethan Montgomery leaned against the window of his office, coffee cooling in his hand, gaze distant. He had just come from a board meeting where a multi-million-dollar deal had closed. Applause, handshakes, congratulations, all things that used to feel like triumph. But now they felt muted, hollow even. His thoughts drifted to Lena again. It had been 3 months since the wedding at the vineyard. 3 months since his public confession. Since he'd admitted that what had started as a performance had become something painfully and beautifully real. And for 3 months, Lena had been present but cautious. She led him into her world in small steps, a coffee here, a walk through the winter market there. She'd let him help set up the online store for the Story Nook, and even allowed him to host a children's reading night, where he fumbled through The Very Hungry Caterpillar while 3 toddlers tried to climb into his lap. She laughed at him that night, really laughed, and yet something still held her back. Ethan understood. Trust once broken even slightly takes time. Love doesn't grow on grand gestures alone. It grows in the quiet, ordinary acts that say, "I see you. I choose you." Again and again. He finished his coffee, grabbed his coat, and walked out of the office without telling anyone where he was going. Over in Wicker Park, Lena stood at the center of the story nook, carefully unboxing a new shipment of books. The store was cozy and warm, filled with the scent of paper and cinnamon tea. Holiday lights blinked in the front window. For the first time in a long time, she felt like the world had paused just enough for her to breathe. When the door chimed and she looked up, she didn't look surprised. Somehow, she had known he would come. "You're early," she said softly. "I didn't want to be late." Ethan stepped inside, shaking snow from his shoulders. He looked around at the store like it was a sacred place. To him, it was. "I've been thinking," he said, hands tucked in his coat pockets, "about what you said, about how different our lives are." Lena tilted her head, slightly unsure of where he was going. "And you're right," he continued. "We are different. You find peace in pages and paintbrushes. I used to find comfort in contracts and control. But being with you taught me something else." He took a breath, steadying himself. "You taught me that strength doesn't mean being untouchable. It means showing up, even when you're unsure. It means choosing someone, even when the script falls apart." She looked at him, emotion flickering behind her eyes. "I don't want a perfect life, Lena. I want an honest one, with you." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small velvet box, not the kind that shouted engagement, but the kind that said something had shifted. Inside was a ring, not flashy, not ornate, just simple, elegant, real like her. "I'm not asking you to marry me right now," he said. "I'm asking if we can keep writing this story together. No roles, no contracts, just us." Lena stood silent for a moment, the soft hum of the heater filling the space. Then she stepped forward, took the box from his hand, and closed it gently. She looked up at him, smiling, not with hesitation, but with quiet conviction. "I was never waiting for a proposal, Ethan. I was waiting to believe you meant it." "I do." "Then yes, let's keep writing." He reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Later that night, they sat side by side on the small love seat in the corner of the shop, a blanket draped over their legs, hot tea in mismatched mugs. Lena leaned her head on his shoulder. "This wasn't supposed to happen," she murmured. "No." He agreed. "It was supposed to be fake." She laughed lightly. "And now it's the most real thing I've ever known." As winter deepened, so did their bond. They didn't need candlelit dinners or grand pronouncements. They needed shared routines, stolen glances, late-night conversations about dreams and fears and futures. Ethan made fewer trips to the boardroom and more to the bookstore. Lena painted, more smiled more. The story, Nook thrived not because of Ethan's influence, but because she had someone beside her who believed in what she built. They still argued sometimes, about space, about schedules. But they always came back to each other, always chose understanding over ego. By spring, they had built something neither of them expected: a quiet life, filled with books, laughter, mutual respect, and love. And somewhere in the heart of Chicago, tucked between old shelves and new beginnings, a love story that began as a lie grew into something too real to ever be rehearsed. In the heart of bustling Chicago, among penthouse meetings and quiet corners of a small bookstore, the story of Ethan Caldwell and Lena Hart unfolded not with fanfare or fairy dust, but with the kind of slow, deliberate magic that only honesty and unexpected connection can bring. Ethan, a man born into privilege and pressure, had built his world on discipline, logic, and structure. CEO, of a multi-million-dollar firm. He knew how to manage people, close deals, and control outcomes. What he didn't know was how to let someone in, not truly, not past the layers of rehearsed charm and calculated risk. Lena, in contrast, had built her life on passion principle and perseverance. A freelance artist trying to save her late grandmother's independent bookstore, she lived simply but with depth. Each book on her shelf, each brushstroke on her canvas, a reflection of the life she chose. When their worlds collided through a contract, a staged relationship meant to protect Ethan from emotional distractions, neither imagined the act would turn into something real, but it did. What began as a transactional agreement turned into shared laughter during awkward dinners, stolen moments of vulnerability behind the scripted smiles, and a bond that couldn't be faked, even if they tried. Lena saw through Ethan's guarded exterior and found the man beneath the one who felt deeply but had forgotten how to show it. Ethan, in turn, discovered not just admiration, but genuine affection for the woman who challenged his assumptions and brought color to his grayscale life. Their journey wasn't smooth. There were secrets, misunderstandings, and the ever-looming fear of public judgment. When the truth about their arrangement was nearly exposed, Ethan had a choice: retreat into damage control or step forward into truth. And for once he chose truth. Not because it was safe, but because it was real. He stood by Lena, not just in front of a crowd, but when it mattered most, when she felt vulnerable, uncertain, and exposed. That moment changed everything, not because it was dramatic, but because it was honest. Together, they learned that love isn't built on perfection. It's built on presence, on choosing each other day by day, on seeing past the roles we play and honoring the people we are beneath them. The lesson from Ethan and Lena's story is simple yet powerful. Sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected circumstances. We don't need perfect timing or perfect plans. We just need courage. The courage to show up, to be honest, and to choose connection over convenience. In a world that often values image over intimacy, their story is a gentle reminder that love doesn't need to be loud to be real. It just needs to be true. What about you? Have you ever experienced a connection that started in an unexpected way, or learned something profound from a moment that wasn't part of the plan? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and share your story. And if this emotional journey touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned for more unforgettable, soul-stirring stories that remind us what it truly means to love, to grow, and to live.